On a seemingly ordinary Friday afternoon in the spring of 2019, the suburb of West Dublin was shattered by a brazen act of violence. It was around 2 p.m. when a man casually stepped out of the front door of his parents' house, unaware of the impending danger. As he moved through the front garden, a white Peugeot Partner van appeared, driving slowly up the street. In a flash, the van's side window rolled down, and the neighborhood was torn apart by a hail of gunfire. The man was struck multiple times in a ruthless daylight attack, collapsing instantly as the van sped away, leaving behind a scene of horror. Neighbors who witnessed the attack could only watch in shock as the man lay motionless, his life brutally snatched away in a blink of an eye. The van was later found abandoned and burnt out near a local school. As the flames devoured the vehicle, a handgun, equipped with a silencer, slipped out onto the pavement, an eerie reminder of the calculated violence that had just occurred. The victim was pronounced dead at the scene, his lifeless body transported to the city morgue for a post-mortem. It didn't take long for authorities to identify the victim as 42-year-old David Chen Lynch, a seasoned criminal with a reputation for operating under the radar. Lynch had skillfully evaded both prosecution and media attention, despite a deep-rooted involvement in organised crime. Lynch's murder was the latest chapter in a complex and long-standing gangland feud in Clondalkin, a dispute that had simmered since 2013, but had recently reignited with brutal intensity. This local conflict had also ensnared associates of notorious veteran criminal John Gilligan, whose network had been heavily involved in the West Dublin drug trade, pulling them into the crossfire of these deadly disputes. Tragically, Lynch was neither the first, nor, as feared, the last victim of this relentless and bloody gangland war. Hailing from Roller in Clondalkin, West Dublin, Wayne Whelan was a familiar figure to the Gardaí, his involvement in serious organised crime spanning more than 2 decades. His criminal career first caught the attention of law enforcement in the 1990s, when he made a name for himself as a car thief and joyrider. Whelan was part of a notoriously violent and unpredictable group known as the M50 Gang, a collection of around 20 criminals aged between 19 and 24 from the Ballyfermot, Ronanstown and Clondalkin areas. The gang earned their name for their method of operation, stealing high-powered cars and using the M50 motorway as their main route to carry out a spree of robberies across Dublin and the surrounding counties. They targeted homes, shops and petrol stations, seizing cars, cash and any valuables they could get their hands on. Equipped with radio receivers tuned to guard the frequencies, walkie-talkies and sometimes even sawn-off shotguns, the gang was well prepared for any encounter with law enforcement. But they rarely had to worry. Their high-powered BMWs and Audis easily outpaced the older, outmoded Garda Patrol and unmarked cars, making them a formidable and elusive force on Dublin streets. Whelan wasn't deeply involved with the gang and had transitioned into the drug trade by the time it dissolved, initially focusing on ecstasy and speed. He was well liked, known for his friendly, outgoing nature. Among his friends, he was seen as a happy-go-lucky, big, jolly guy who was generous with both his money and drugs, often sharing them during weekend gatherings. Whelan quickly advanced from dealing party drugs to handling cocaine in wholesale quantities, establishing himself as a major figure in the trade. In 2005, he was arrested in connection with one of the largest cocaine seizures of the year. The Garda National Drugs Unit raided a house in Maynooth that December, where Whelan and his gang had been operating a cocaine mixing factory. Inside, the Gardaí uncovered compressors, blenders, mixers, weighing scales, and other equipment capable of producing over €4 million worth of drugs. They seized more than €2.5 million worth of cocaine and €100,000 in cash. Whelan and his associate Martin Walsh were arrested, questioned, and charged with drug dealing. Both men were brought before a court and remanded in custody. However, Whelan filed a habeas corpus case with the High Court, which he won. The court determined that there had been a procedural error in the district court, leading to his release just 2 days before Christmas 2005. As a result, Whelan never served time for the drug offences. On May 6, 2006, the case against him collapsed, and the charges were ultimately withdrawn. The case reflected a pattern in Whelan's lifelong interactions with the law. Despite being a significant player in the drug trade in West Dublin for many years, his only convictions were for traffic violations. Although he appeared in court over 65 times during his career, he consistently received lenient outcomes, including the benefit of the Probation Act and suspended sentences, resulting in little to no time spent in prison. Whelan grew close to 2 other criminals, David Chen Lynch and Ballyfermot gang leader Mark Desmond, who would go on to become one of the most feared figures in West Dublin. Desmond, infamously known as Guinea Pig, was a suspect in 2 murders in 1999 and was also believed to be a paedophile. Whelan's decision to testify in Desmond's defence when he was charged with 4 counts of unlawful possession of firearms with intent to endanger life significantly altered public perception of him. After Desmond was released from prison in 2004, he reconnected with Whelan and Lynch. Desmond even stayed at Whelan's house in Lucan, where they often took drugs together. Senior Gardaí believed that this association marked the beginning of Whelan's downfall. Desmond was widely disliked and distrusted, and his association with Whelan led to a shift in how others viewed Whelan. He had entered a more dangerous phase of criminality, marked by escalating violence, gun crime, and drug abuse. Despite the socialising and the facade of friendship, both Whelan and Lynch were fully aware of Desmond's dangerous nature. During this time, Lynch and Whelan maintained connections with criminal gangs and drug dealers across Ballyfermot, Tala, and Clondalkin. Their ties to individuals involved in ongoing murderous feuds made them prime targets for the Garda's Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau and the Criminal Assets Bureau. As is often the case in organised crime, feuds erupted both within and between rival gangs in West Dublin and Tala. Former friends and criminal partners turned against each other, driven by personal grudges and vendettas. Whelan, Desmond, Lynch, and their fellow gangsters were all affected by the escalation in violence in the Greater Clondalkin area. On the evening of August 29, 2013, Jason J. Carroll, Whelan's friend, with whom he worked in the ecstasy and amphetamine trade, was shot in the face at his home in Cherrywood Drive in Clondalkin. The 39-year-old father of 4 was attacked on his doorstep while his daughter slept upstairs. Carroll's connections to the Kinahan cartel, which had a network of criminal associates and hired other gangs to execute cartel-ordered attacks, made him a target. Like other Dublin criminals, Whelan was suspected of being recruited for cartel hit jobs. Carroll's murder was part of an ongoing turf war over drug trade control, which fueled further violence, including 2 additional gangland killings in 2017. Darren Nugent and John Gibson were both gunned down within a week of each other that September. However, the feud also took a tragic toll on innocent lives, most notably that of 21-year-old Dean Johnson. On August 24, 2013 at 12:20 a.m, Dean was walking home from a night out when a car pulled up and 2 men emerged. Despite Dean's attempt to flee, he was shot dead. The gunmen had intended to target a different gangland criminal who had been at the same pub as Dean that evening, but they followed the wrong person and ended up killing an innocent man. 3 years later, Mark Desmond's involvement in organised crime came back to haunt him when his so-called friends, including Wayne Whelan and David Lynch, betrayed him. In December 2016, Desmond was shot in Griffin Valley Park after he went there believing he was meeting someone he trusted. Although Whelan was arrested and interrogated about the murder, Gardaí were unable to gather enough evidence to build a case against him. As a result, neither Whelan nor David Lynch was ever charged in connection with the crime. However, they had unwittingly set the stage for their own downfall. The threat to each of their lives intensified when the brothers turned against each other. Lynch was the first to fall. On March 1, 2019 at 2:15 p.m, he was shot 4 times at close range in the head, neck, and leg, while in the front garden of his parents' house on Foxdean Avenue in Clondalkin. The getaway car, a Peugeot van, was later found burning, along with a semi-automatic pistol and silencer nearby. Another getaway car, a silver Toyota Corolla, was discovered ablaze in Lucan. Although Whelan was a suspect in Lynch's murder, the act of eliminating one rival only made him a more prominent target. Gardaí once again warned him of the danger to his life, but he ignored their security advice. Meanwhile, Whelan's drug use was spiralling out of control. Once a supplier, he'd now become a heavy user, and his increasing recklessness and carelessness reflected this decline. The drug trade in the Clondalkin area had evolved without him. The Kinahan gang had taken over, dominating the market and installing their own representative to oversee operations in the region. On the morning of September 4, 2019, Wayne Whelan had spent time at his parents' house before heading back to his own nearby around lunchtime. As he drove into his estate, his car was rammed by a white Volkswagen caddy van. A gunman emerged and fired 11 shots at Whelan while he was seated in the driver's seat, hitting him 4 times in the body, head, and arms. Limerick gun-for-hire Wayne Ryan was one of the 2 masked men in the van lying in wait for Whelan. Despite his injuries, Whelan managed to escape his car and attract the attention of neighbours. One of them brought him into their home. Panicking, he collapsed at the nearby house, seriously injured, but still alive. When Gardaí arrived, they found the hallway covered in blood. Whelan told them that both the driver and the shooter were wearing balaclavas. Sitting at the bottom of the stairs, his clothes drenched in blood, he grew weak when he tried to stand. The Gardaí helped him to lie on the floor while awaiting paramedics, who then took him to the hospital. 4 bullet fragments were extracted from Whelan's arms and chest wall, yet he survived the attack against the odds. True to his nature, a photo of him smiling and recovering in the hospital, despite the tubes and wounds, made its way onto social media. A technical examination of the scene revealed 11 bullet holes in his windscreen, 11 spent bullet casings, and fragments from 7 bullets. The white Caddy, which had been set alight shortly after the shooting, was inspected by Gardaí. They discovered a severely fire-damaged handgun, its magazine, and the remnants of a silencer. Soon after, another car was found burning in Bray, followed by a third vehicle in Kilcock that evening. Gardaí observed the man leaving the area of the third burning car and jumping into an Opel Insignia. The vehicle was subsequently tracked and stopped just before Leakslip. Inside, the Gardaí found 4 men and a petrol can filled with diesel oil in the boot, leading to their arrest on suspicion of arson. In 2021, those 4 men involved were sentenced to a total of 33 years. Wayne Ryan, the Limerick criminal who was the triggerman, received a 15-year sentence. The other 3, Caelan Crawford, Darren Henderson, and Charles McLean, were sentenced to 7 and 8 years respectively. The attempt on Whelan, who had grown up with McLean and once operated a car sales business with him until it closed in 2016, became a stark example of the betrayal so common in the criminal underworld. Whelan fled the country following his release from the hospital. However, he couldn't stay away from Dublin or his criminal past for long. His enemies, some of whom he had once considered friends, discovered he had returned and planned his murder. Just 2 months later, on November 18, 2019, Whelan's luck ran out. He was shot dead at Mount Andrew Rise in Lucan. His vehicle was then set on fire with his body inside. A heavy cocaine user, Whelan was first suspected by Gardaí of having gone out to meet a drug dealer. Despite still having shrapnel in his body from the previous shooting just 2 months earlier, he ventured out on a dark, damp winter night, reportedly to score cocaine. His family reported him missing, and his charred body was eventually discovered in the passenger seat of a car he had bought only 6 days before. He had been shot in the head, likely from behind, suggesting the shooter was in the back seat when Whelan was caught off guard. It took 2 days to identify the remains found in the burnt-out car as Wayne Whelan. The 42-year-old gangland criminal was so severely burned that identification was only possible through DNA, as Gardaí needed more than just medical and dental records to confirm his death as a result of organised crime. Wayne Whelan's death mirrored the dangerous criminal life he had lived. Although he was aware of the threats against him, he clearly didn't anticipate his life would end so soon, or in such a manner. Whelan got into a navy Toyota Corolla with a person or people he trusted, only to fall victim to a double cross, as so many others have before him. The following morning, 3 fire trucks were called to the scene to ensure Whelan's dignity was preserved during the removal of his body for the post-mortem. The trucks were strategically placed to block the view of the bystanders and prevent media from capturing any footage or photographs. It became apparent that Whelan's night out was not just about scoring cocaine. Given a serious murder attempt he had survived 2 months earlier, he was highly cautious and only associated with people he knew well. On that fateful evening, Whelan was sitting next to his wife Barbara Harmon when he received a call from his friend, Anthony Casserly. Casserly, who had grown up nearby and remained close friends with Whelan until his death, invited him to the pub to watch the Ireland-Denmark soccer match. At 7:30 p.m, Whelan left the house and got into a Toyota Corolla, which had been bought a few days earlier from a Circle K garage. CCTV footage captured him walking to the car and getting into the front passenger seat at 7:33 p.m. Just 9 minutes later, the Toyota was found burned out. The post-mortem revealed that Whelan had been shot dead before the car was set on fire. He had been sitting in the front passenger seat when someone in the back seat, positioned behind and to the right of him, fired 3 shots to his head. Shortly after the incident, media websites began reporting a car fire, with suspicions that someone might be dead inside. Around 2 hours later, various text messages started circulating in a WhatsApp group, raising concerns that the victim might be Whelan. Both Whelan and Casserly were members of this group. Cassidy began sending messages in the group, claiming he hadn't seen Whelan and had stayed home instead of going to the pub to watch the match. As news spread that the person in the car might be Wayne, a group of people, including Cassidy, gathered at Whelan's mother's house to offer support. Cassidy repeated to Wayne's mother that he hadn't seen him and had stayed home that evening. However, the person who drove Cassidy home that night found his behaviour suspicious, particularly as he was adamant, without any evidence, that the victim in the car was Whelan. In his statement to the Gardaí, Cassidy claimed he had initially planned to meet Whelan, but had instead stayed home. However, CCTV footage showing his Volkswagen Golf entering the Mount Andrew estate and approaching the crime scene just minutes before Whelan entered the Toyota revealed that Cassidy's account was false. This inconsistency led Gardaí to suspect that Cassidy might have been involved in Whelan's murder. Consequently, mobile phones belonging to Cassidy and his uncle, Christopher Moran, were seized for investigation. In the days leading up to the murder, Cassidy's Volkswagen had been used by his uncle. The car had been thoroughly cleaned before it was seized on November 19, and the floor mats were still damp. Both men were subsequently arrested and interviewed. It soon became evident that Moran had been the getaway driver for the hit. In 2022, Cassidy was sentenced to 9 years in prison, with the last 2 years suspended. His father, Mark Cassidy, received a 5-year suspended sentence for providing a false alibi, claiming his son was at home during the murder. In a victim impact statement, Whelan's sister, Hazel Granger, expressed her anguish, noting that the most distressing part was that her brother trusted Cassidy, who had come to their home that night while the family was desperately trying to locate Wayne. That was it for today's video. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see our next videos.